Trail and ultra runners, what is going on? What's happening? Welcome to another episode of the Koopcast. As always, I'm your host, Coach Jason Koop, and on this episode of the podcast, we have another CTS Athlete Spotlight, and this time it is with Kevin Mays and his coach, Andy Jones-Wilkins, more affectionately known as AJW. Like many athletes during the COVID-19 pandemic, Kevin has had his season turned upside down with canceled races and uncertain plans. And I wanted to bring Kevin on the show today as an excellent example of how to design a personal project that is both physically and psychologically challenging, as well as personally meaningful. Kevin took his train wreck season and made a pivot to attempt a fastest known time style event on a 51-mile triple out and back run of the Mammoth Cave Trail in Kentucky. And what I found interesting during the course of this conversation was that Kevin and his coach set up a race day orientation around this event, complete with aid stations, how he mentally approached the attempt, and kept coming back to the why surrounding the endeavor. I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, and let's get right into it. Here's my conversation with CTS athlete Kevin Mays and his coach, AJW. To start out with, everybody's got to know you guys' voices. And since Andy probably has the most distinctive voice, you get to go last. So Kevin, why don't you introduce yourself really quick for the listeners?
Sure. My name is Kevin Mays, and I'm from Bowling Green, Kentucky. Have been running for about 8 years, so kind of started late in life. I'm 56. Just got hooked on trail running about 3 years ago, and then that is like a gateway drug to ultra running, and that's where I'm at today.
And you have a beautiful southern drawl. I love those Kentucky draws. Andy, why don't you tell the listeners are going to know you just because of being in the ultra scene, but quick intro, and more importantly, where are you? Because we're going to hear crickets in the background chirping every so often.
Hi, I'm Andy Jones-Wilkins, and I've been running ultras since the early 90s, and I'm Kevin's coach with Carmichael Training Systems, and I'm currently sitting outside the back of the employee cafeteria at the Grand Teton National Park, Coulter Bay, and where I'm here last few days of vacation with my family.
And nobody is going to feel sorry for you because of that location. But you're there really specifically to get ready for a race that is happening this weekend. So by the time this podcast comes out, that race will be said and done. But you're going to do a race. It's your first race in the COVID era. Before we get into the Mammoth Cave Railroad Bike and Hike FKT that Kevin ran, we're going to spend the majority of the time talking about that. Like, what are you going to be expecting for the race?
Well, I'm heading up to the Beaverhead 100K, which is somewhat in my old stomping grounds. I used to live in Idaho, and this race takes place along the Idaho-Montana border on the Continental Divide. And the race organization about 5-6 weeks ago got permission and made the decision to continue with the race. And it'll be my first race since February, which was before the COVID-19 crisis, if you will. And I'm expecting the unexpected, I suppose. It'll be interesting to have grab and go aid station supplies and wear a mask going into aid stations, socially distant opening pre-race briefing out in the park. They've done a great job preparing for that, and I think most of all, it'll be very interesting to see how the race ends up unfolding just as an event. I know that I've been of the belief, and I think you have too, Koop, that ultra trail running in particular does have social distancing kind of in its DNA, and I'd be curious to see how this race uses that. And and to experience it myself. They're doing quite a few health protocols, taking temperatures, things like that you've heard of, other happening in other places. But I'm looking forward to it, and if nothing else, I'm looking forward to another nice long day in the mountains with some like-minded people, because it's been a long time.
Yeah, I'm of the same mind. I just want to kind of get back to it in a responsible way,
right?
Obviously, but I think we're all kind of chomping at the bit. All right, well. Good luck this weekend. Have fun. It is a strange time indeed. And that's
looks like you got the right buff for it there, AJ.
Oh yeah, this is a buff that Kevin gave me a few months back. I think was it before or after the bottle of whiskey?
It was right after.
Right after, yeah.
I sense an inside story that might take a few hours to explain. But a lot of the weirdness in that's related to COVID is it's permeated both the race space and this personal project space, and this is something that I want to talk to both of you two about as coach and athlete. Kevin, you did a really cool personal project recently, and I want to start out with to set the scene of what the trail is itself, how it kind of popped up on your radar. And then we can kind of get into how you executed it as an athlete, and then how Andy helped you out as a coach.
Okay. Well, I live about 20 minutes from Mammoth Cave National Park, which is the largest cave system in the U.S. So it's a great place to go up and get to. We don't have a lot of good technical trails around my area, but Mammoth Cave has some. So I've been spending a considerable amount of time going up there. And when it came to the time frame of my training, when I needed to incorporate a 50-miler, and of course we know all the organized races have been canceled, I was kind of faced with a dilemma. What do? Do I just keep running regular endurance runs, or do I proceed? And I decided it kind of helped me determine what my why was, why I was in ultra running to begin with. So I thought, I'm just going to go ahead and do my own 50-miler. Can I do that? Can I set one up? Can I logistically plan it out? Can I physically and mentally handle doing that when there's nobody else around, no cheering people, no aid stations? And it came to me that trail that I'd been running in Mammoth Cave would be the perfect one. It's a gravel kind of trail, but with some nice little hills in it. And it's about 8.5 miles out and back, so 17-mile loop. So I just set up doing 3 of those to get my 50-miler.
And the way that this started out, I get the impression that it kind of came about because of just a series of events. You had some things on the calendar. Mm-hmm. And they all got obliterated, just like everybody else's things got obliterated. What did you have on the calendar previous to this that you were looking at doing?
I had a 50-mile race set up, and I'm drawing a blank where that was. You remember, AJ? I don't remember where that was. Anyway, I had a 50-miler set up for May. I had a 100K set up for this month in the Kettle Moran 100K. All leading up to my A race, which is 100-mile, the Yeti 100-mile race in September. So all, like you said, all those just got wiped off because of the virus. So you just we kind of had to get our imagination into gear and figure out how to compensate for that.
And so this was very literally serving as like a cornerstone piece of your training.
Yes.
For a 100-miler down the line. And
correct.
That 100-miler down the line is still, as of, wow, I always get dated when I record these podcasts and I release them like 2 weeks later. As of July 9th, that is still on the calendar, still something that you're actively working towards.
It is.
Okay, so you have this out and back course that you set up, the Mammoth Cave Railroad Bike and Hike Trail. Is there a locally easier way to say that? Is there like a local, it's just the railroad trail or something like that?
Right here we just call it the trail, the Mammoth Cave Trail.
The trail.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll call it the trail. So you have this route picked out, and it's out and back and out and back and out and back to equal 50 miles.
Correct.
Okay, you took a little bit of time earlier, but I want to go into a little bit more depth. Why this trail? Because you can do 50-miler anywhere.
Yeah.
You can do it around your house. A lot of people are doing these quarantine backyard ultras, 4-mile loops around their house and things like that. What was it specifically about this that resonated with you that you wanted to do a 50-miler for?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, it's my favorite trail, one of my favorite trails, and very convenient to get to. But more importantly, it really approximates the type of trail that I'm going to be running my 100-miler on. It's the same type of material, basically the same type of elevation and altitude changes. So I wanted to make sure that what I'm training on is going to be what I'm facing.
And Andy, I'm going to bring you in here for a second as Kevin's coach. When you're going through all of this back and forth of, okay, here's how we lay out the season, because you have this apex race, this 100-miler at the end of the year, and we're going to do A, B, and C leading up to it. A, B, and C kind of get wiped off. Take us through the process of putting in this 50-miler, like how you're viewing it as a coach.
Well, Kevin does love this trail, and I knew it's like it's his home trail, and so he had done many out and backs on it, and I felt like it would fit. I think deeper background, he had some disappointing results in the fall, early winter. So another piece of the puzzle, and I'm not saying these were bad results, but they were definitely disappointing to Kevin himself. And he, that caused a lot of conversation between the two of us about nutrition, about injuries, about hills, things like that. So even before COVID hit and we were mapping out the season, I realized that Kevin was going to definitely benefit from quote unquote training races. And we know not all athletes benefit from training races. Some of them overdo it in training races and then their A race is ruined. I got the sense that wasn't the case with Kevin. So the confidence that would go into a do-it-yourself 50-miler once everything was shot down was actually a pretty short conversation, and it was precluded. Kevin, correct me if I'm wrong. Was it 4 weeks before that you did a double out and back?
It was, yes. Yeah.
So 4 weeks before the 50, he did a 34. I think the record should show, too, it's technically a 51-miler he did because it's 3 17-milers. But nonetheless, that was huge for the confidence. And as we get to the rest of the story, we'll hear a little bit about how the third out and back came to be on race day. But I felt as much as the physical benefit, the psychological and emotional benefit, I didn't doubt the fact that he could do kind of the mind-numbing same thing over and over again. I didn't. He's mature enough and goal-oriented enough that was not going to be an issue. But the distance, the nutrition, staying on top of things. I mean, we had some nutrition challenges, so dialing in nutrition on the 34-miler was really important, and it set the stage nicely for the 51-miler.
So you guys were using this in a multitude of different ways. First off is obviously like a physical piece of the training process, right? Just putting 51 miles. I got to keep correcting myself now because we're not giving you enough credit, Kevin, by calling it a 50-mile and rounding down. It was a physical part of the training process. You were using it to almost kind of like rebound from some disappointments. Yeah. According to Andy, is that a accurate way to put it? Good way to put it. Okay. And in addition to that, you're using it to test case your race day nutrition program. Mm-hmm. But it seems like, I don't want to paint the picture that this was hastily put together, but you didn't put it out 5 months down the road. You just kind of looked at it and said, yep, I'm capable of doing this. I don't have to over-engineer the situation. I'm going to go out and do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty much correct. It was kind of like the light bulb came on and said, there's my route.
There it is. Well, and I think the last piece that's worth mentioning is that it meant something to you. It was a trail that you run quite commonly, you easily identified with, and it's not just some random piece of trail or loop that you happen to cobble together because you had to do it.
It's kind of my version of Andy's Western States route. He knows that route intimately. I know this one intimately.
Okay. So since you know it so intimately, go ahead, Andy.
I think it's worth saying too, because of that knowledge. One of the disappointing races late last year was where we had made some assumptions about what the aid stations would be like, and where, and some fueling, and it turned out to not be true. So the beauty of this 51 miler was the predictability of it. Kevin knows the course like the back of his hand. It could be out and back 3 times. He could get some friends, at least, for the first couple loops, to show up and provide some aid. So I think the predictability and the knowledge really helped, so that he could just get out there and run.
I love the fact that both of you keep using this vocabulary race, and even the things associated with a race. So you're using the word course as opposed to trail, right? Because that's what we call it a race course, not the trail. You have aid stations. Did it very much feel like a race to you, Kevin?
It did. As Andy said, I had set up where some friends would meet me at the far out point of the loop to bring me some food and some water and things. So it's kind of like, it felt like coming into an aid station when I'd see them, and then get that little extra boost of somebody cheering you on.
Did you have like a race bib and, a medical band that they would clip if you didn't make the cutoffs? Like how far did all of these elements of a race actually go?
Well, ironically, yes, I did have a race bib. It was I signed up for Laz's great virtual race across Tennessee, so I printed that bib out and had that. That's what started. That was my first race for that course. But interestingly enough, I did set up, my pace splits and trying to maintain a semblance of what it would be like to be in a race with cutoffs. All through this, my whole training goal is to hopefully one day be able to run Western States and try to, make sure at least meet the 30-hour cutoff, if not the 24. And so when I plan this out, I'm planning it like I'm trying to use the same pace for a 100-miler.
Interesting.
So all throughout the run, I'm checking my pace. Am I meeting the goal?
I would add too that we talked through race day orientation. If I'm not mistaken, we established an actual start time.
Yep.
Right. So that Kevin was going to start at a specific time, and we designed that thinking of trying to minimize as much as we might get into darkness on the backside as necessary. So I mean, we really were. I'm glad you picked up on that, Koop. We really were thinking of this as a race. I mean, even the fact that Kevin was texting me at the end of each loop to tell me how it was going,
And would you normally do that in a race? Text your coach in the middle of it?
No,
okay.
I would do it at the end, but not in the middle.
Probably not that. But he also knew that I was waiting to hear from him.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, so you've got this race. I'm going to use that terminology as well. You've got this race set up for yourself. Describe the course, because you've done it a lot, but I want to paint like a scene of the mind with the actual trail and the course itself. Like take me and the listeners like on that journey with you. Like, what does a trail look like? What are the features of it? How does it all look and feel?
So where I started and where I was able to park my car and begin, that's first 4 miles is probably some of the hilliest of it. I mean, you start out going vertical. Now, granted, the elevation here is not like it is out west, but it's some pretty good inclines. I don't know the grade percentages and all that, but so I'm starting out literally doing my vertical climbs. It's a crushed stone trail, and as the name of it implies, it used to be an old railroad line with some modifications to it. So I'm starting out the first 4 miles or so, hitting a lot of inclines. Then it finally starts to level out at about mile 5 for a good another 4 miles. And then you start hitting some more inclines before you come out to the finish. So it's got a fair number of climbing that you have to do, out and back.
And so you did that out and back and out and back and out and back, a triple out and back. For 51 miles, not 50. And after it was all said and done, you officially have the Triple Out and Back FKT for the Mammoth Cave Railroad Bike and Hike Trail.
Yes. In an email exchange with you earlier, I said, giving me an FKT is a generous accomplishment, because probably about 30 minutes after this podcast airs, someone's going to beat it.
I'm sure. Well, that's the nature of FKTs, is you can kind of like make them however you want to. But as of today, you go on the fastestknowntime.com website, and you were there, humble Kevin Mays, with your Triple Out and Back of this particular trail in Kentucky.
My 15 minutes of fame.
There you go. Why? It's lasted more than 15 minutes because you did this like 2 or 3 weeks ago now. No, but in all seriousness, like, I know you and Andy were trying to put together something that was meaningful to you. So check the box there. It's a trail that you ran all the time. You wanted to put something together that had a significant amount of distance on it. So 51 miles. And you went out there with a race infrastructure, aid stations, proper start time, and things like that. Were you pushing yourself like it was a race as well?
I was. For the first 2 loops, I was pushing myself just like it would be a race. I was checking my splits, making sure I didn't spend more than a few minutes at each stop for an aid station, and so forth. Now, I'm sure we're going to get in a little bit more what happened between the second and third loop. That's where the wheels started to unravel a little bit. But it was a point where I finally realized I didn't need to push myself as hard as though this was a race. This was more of a personal accomplishment of being able to run the entire distance. So once I took that pressure off of me, it became much more enjoyable.
Okay, so you're pushing.
I should jump in. I got to jump in there, because it was really at the end of the second out and back that it could have switched from being a race to just a training run. Kevin could have just gotten in his car, gone home, called me up, said, I called it good at 34 miles. And he didn't, and it was, he gave himself permission to slow down a little bit. He gave himself permission to take a little bit longer at that third, essentially to begin the third out and back. It turned out to be a really warm, humid day. That was really weighing him down by that point after 34 miles. So it gave him a chance to hit a reset button, just like you would do in a race. But it was very, very interesting for me as a coach, especially in the sort of post-mortem, to realize that even though we had gone through this effort to make sure he thought of it as a race up until that point, it still could have been like, hey, I'm not getting any medal for this. I'm the only guy out here. Dinner's waiting for me at home. I can get out of this and call it good. And he didn't do that. And I think, there are probably many reasons for that, but that's where it really felt a lot more like a race. And I think ultimately, those first couple of miles for Kevin, I think starting loop 3 were tough, but by the end, by the return, by miles 46 to 51 were pretty much at the same pace he had been running that final 5-mile section in the first 2 loops. So it was a good experience, I think, all around, and making it have that race feel helped get him up the trail for that third loop.
Okay, let's talk about the third loop, because both of you have alluded to this. So, Kevin, before we get there, loop number 1, 17 miles, 17.6 miles. How'd you feel?
Perfect. It was textbook.
Everything's going. Okay, loop number 2. You come back to your little aid station. How's it feel?
Getting rough.
Okay.
Yeah. In my typical luck, all the days and weeks leading up to that day, we had beautiful weather in Kentucky. I mean, mid-70s, no humidity, just perfect, like probably what it feels like in Wyoming and Colorado. But as my luck would happen, that morning, a heat wave came in, and we went from having a high of in the mid-70s to the mid-90s. I mean, it got to 95. We had a 20-degree jump in our heat and the humidity. So towards the end of the second loop, I was becoming very dehydrated. In fact, I was starting to experience some signs of hypothermia. And I was not sweating anymore. I couldn't drink anything, couldn't pee, very dizzy. Not so sure that I didn't even black out one time, because I lost some miles in there. I just didn't know where I was. And that's when I thought, okay, this 50 milers just turned into a 50K, that I was going to head back to the car and call it quits. So I pulled out my phone. I had about 2 miles left. And I texted Andy and I said, if there was ever a time you had an Andyism, this would be it. Give it to me. And so he was responsive, sent back a few encouragements, but the one that got me was the suck it up buttercup. Yeah, he said, you got to keep going because you're going to regret not doing this. So I headed back to the car, took about 30 to 40 minutes to regroup, cool down, turn the air conditioner on me, take in some water, some food, just hit that reset button before heading out on that third loop.
All right, Andy, take us through your point of view during that point of the entire race. You know Kevin's out there. You know it's a hot day. You know he's going to be suffering. You get, some messages after the end of the first loop. Everything's going to plan. And then you get I need some help. What do you think at that time?
I was worried that we were back in the fall and winter, some of the disappointing races. So I kind of tried to pull out all the stops. I mean, this was via text, but I tried to pull out all the stops, and then, just suck it up buttercup just kind of came out there. I think if we ever get memorial shirts made for the FKT, that'll be the motto, because it really did. It was the one that stuck with Kevin. And of course, since then, anytime something goes wrong with my running, he tells me to suck it up buttercup also. So it's kind of become a good little thing between us. But, I said, look, it's not a race, but you're going to be bummed out if you don't finish this thing. I sort of did that. I said, look, it's okay. You're not going to break whatever time goal you wanted to do. It's okay that you might have to finish in the dark. Get yourself cooled down. Get into air conditioning. And hit reset and get out there one more time. And so, and at that point, he just kind of got it done. And as I said, I think the 30-minute break helped, but so too did getting the momentum again and getting rolling. And frankly, since then, in the weeks subsequent to this, Kevin's training has been fantastic. I got to say, a little more background information. Kevin teaches regularly spin classes, upwards to 3 times a week, pretty intensely. And so pre-COVID, he was balancing his running training with spin classes. And when COVID came, a lot of the spin classes were canceled. And I was like, well, dude, let's throw in some more running. And yet, we weren't sure how much more the more running was going to impact. But I think it certainly helped. Obviously, I hope he gets to go back to the spin classes. They're really good. It's a great way for him to get, a high intensity workout without the impact. But I have to believe that a little bit of the fortunate aspect of that third loop going well was a little bit more running on Kevin's legs over the previous 6 weeks, that then once the reset button was hit, he was ready to go.
Kevin, in your spin classes now, when it gets really hard, you just tell him to suck it up buttercup?
Well, I have officially retired from spin classes, so I won't get a chance to tell them that. But
you got to go back just to use that line. Come on now.
Yeah, but I do tell that to my running group.
There you go. You can use it there. It's always a good line. So this whole thing, this whole event that you've planned out, this 51 miler, is playing out just like a race. You have the highs, you have the lows. You come into an aid station, and Andy, virtually, when a lot of times he'd be there physically, get your butt out of the chair. And I think that that's a really cool element of it. So take us through the third lap. You get up, you decide that you're kind of like resolved to finish at this point. There is not going to be a DNF. If there is there a finisher's medal at the end of this waiting for you?
No.
Okay, well, you'd still get that if there were a finisher's medal or a belt buckle or whatever. But take everybody through the last lap after this incredible pep talk by Andy.
Well, I had mentioned earlier that I had put the pressure on me to try to make a pace goal and try to maintain that. So when I came in after that second loop and realized that if I were running an actual 24-hour goal race, I wouldn't make it. I mean, I would miss the cutoff. And so that was kind of a little bit demoralizing, but after I regrouped, I began to realize I've just taken that pressure off of me. And it did free me up to go back out, because now I'm like, well, hell, I got, what else am I going to do? You know, I know I'll wake up the next day feeling fine. So as Andy said, I would regret not having finished that race, that run. So after taking that pressure off, heading back out, and by the way, some of the food I used was that suggestion. What is the it's the Irish potatoes and the chips.
Oh, just potato chips?
Nah, poutine or something.
Polenta.
Polenta, yes.
Chips.
So it was
yeah,
a polenta. I had some
Tordesillas.
polenta and chips to regroup with. But so I headed back out.
Wait a minute. Hold on. You had the wherewithal in advance of all of this to have polenta, of all things, at your aid station.
Yeah. Oh, I had everything.
Okay, let's go through everything, because I think this is pretty fun too. So let's paint this picture. You're doing this self-supported race. What's in your aid station bin?
So I had packaged up all these things the night before and taken them to the people who were going to deliver them. But for like the first stop, I think I had avocado wraps with bacon and just some water and chips. Everything was chips. And then the second aid station, I had peanut butter and jelly sandwich. There was all the candies. You know, I had Oreos, I had M&Ms, I had the gummy bears. And back in my car, I had the more heavy stuff like the polenta, some boiled potatoes, and of course, you know, around here you have to have Fireball. So I had some of that there too.
Oh, that sounds horrible.
I think it's important to keep in mind too. We're looking at long-term goal here, 100-mile race.
Yeah.
Nutrition has been a winding road for Kevin. So literally, when we talked before this and before the 50K, I was like, hey, throw in the kitchen sink. You have everything. See what looks good or seems good at the time, and if polenta is going to be the thing, then go for some polenta.
Yeah, just trying to train the gut, as you would say.
I'm so glad that the polenta and chip story has made its way not only over to the States, but over to the States in a way that an athlete can actually use it. So I love it. All right, so Kevin, let's wrap it up a little bit. What did you learn?
I learned my why, to be quite honestly. When I got back from that second loop and was debating whether or not I was going to have to drop or what to do, and I took that pressure off of me of trying to maintain that pace, I began to realize it's not about the race. It's about what can I physically and mentally accomplish. And that's what became more important to me. I want to see. That's why I got started in ultra running to begin with. I wanted to see what I could do, and that has become ever more important as this pandemic has gone on, and more races have just dropped off the radar. It's no longer chasing after some swag or a medal or a buckle, although I still want that Western States buckle, but it's more of, can I do this, and that's my whole goal. Is I want to get out there and I want to accomplish that. I'm 56 years old, started running late. I want to be able to prove to myself, my family, my friends that that age has nothing to do with this. If you want to achieve 50 miles or 100 miles, then put the work in and do it. And when COVID struck and people were faced with, oh, well, geez, why do I run anymore? It's like, you got to stay disciplined if you want to accomplish what you want to achieve.
Kevin, I think if we learn anything from COVID, if people take away from this their meaningful, soulful connection with running and the way that you described it as your why, that's going to be a wholeheartedly positive outcome out of this whole pandemic. So I'm 100% with you there.
Yeah, if you'd asked me a few years ago to run a solo 50K or 100K that's coming up here next, I would have said, why in the hell would I want to do that? But now it's, hey, why not? Let's do it.
I love it. Andy, any last words of wisdom before we let you two go?
I mean, I'm a broken record when it comes to mental training, and Kevin did this on his own, but you know, the grit he showed, you know, getting out of the car and doing that third loop, that's gonna pay dividends far beyond any race result. And I think for me, what I learned as a coach, and even what I've, you know, imparted on some of my other athletes over the last couple of months, as people have become increasingly frustrated with the lack of races that are out there, is, you know, there's still a lot of things to learn, a lot of ways in which we can learn about ourselves in this sport, independent of a race, even if we create our own race, like Kevin and I did. So that's really what I learned the most, and you know, it was a really good example of a coach-athlete relationship. I mean, yes, the texting, you know, during the event and the "suck it up, Buttercup," you know, that's kind of the surface stuff. But I think the way in which it played out, the aspect of the training between a coach and an athlete, that is about the training program and putting in the miles and so forth. But it's also about, you know, having a strong enough relationship that you can make something like this happen.
I love it. What a great way to end. Andy, thanks for coming on the podcast today. Kevin, thank you for coming on the podcast today. I bet some people are going to be inspired by this, and I do hope that this FKT that you set stands some course of time, you know, at least another day after we finish recording, hopefully by the time we air this podcast. But good luck to you for the rest of the season as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it. You know, it's the stuff you're putting out there, Koop, is just pure gold, and I'm eating it up every week.
No,
thanks a lot, Koop. This was a lot of fun.
And there we have it, folks. I always appreciate bringing athletes like Kevin on the podcast. And I know that athletes like Kevin, they're not going to get onto the cover of Trail Runner magazine or Ultra Running magazine or anything like that, but he can still serve as an inspiration to everybody. And what he was able to do on the Mammoth Cave Trail certainly inspired me, and that's why I wanted to bring his story out on the podcast with his coach, AJW, for everybody to listen to and to share. I hope everybody enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you have any feedback for me, feel free to hit me up on social media. And if you think that one of our coaches, like AJW, or any one of our other fantastic coaches, is the right coach to get your butt in gear for whatever goals you have planned for 2021, go ahead and hit me up on social media, or you can check out all of our coaching packages at trainright.com. That's it for today, folks. Appreciate the heck out of everybody listening. And as always, we will see you out on the trails.